This video is brought to you by Ground News. Stick around to hear more about the special offer they're providing to the entire upper echelon community. All right, today I want to talk about a recent FTC policy decision because that policy has the potential to impact the entire world of YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and Twitch and pretty much every single social media, e-commerce, or community-based technology platform out there. Rumble, Amazon, Kick, the list goes on and on. Basically, to cut right to the point here, the usage of social media bots as well as paid for inauthentic reviews has become the subject of a targeted FTC rule, so to speak, which is a very big step forward when it comes to the enforcement of better standards on social media, in a world where most of what you see online is now completely fabricated. To fully explain why this matters, I have to go back in time and tell a bit of a story. About 5 years ago, I did a series of videos about a fraudulent esports organization called Regal Reserve. I don't need to rehash what that is or how it went. If you want to watch it, you can. It's an excellent series of videos. But the important part is that during the coverage, I learned that the official esports company Twitter account for Regal Reserve, because this was a registered company in the state of California at the time, the official company Twitter account had been purchased, not grown organically, from a third-party broker after initially being compromised and stolen, aka hijacked, that word is important for later on, from a small-scale Filipino celebrity. To be clear, slightly contrary to the title of this very video, that's technically already illegal. The buying and selling of hacked accounts violates a few different laws, but the FTC had a very hard time prosecuting anything, and it was even more difficult for them to impose civil penalties. I'll do the whole obligatory "I'm not a lawyer" speech here, and I welcome any actual lawyers to weigh in on the subject if their field is actually relevant to the subject matter. For example, a divorce lawyer probably doesn't have an abundance of insights or knowledge on consumer protection laws. But my understanding is that the FTC has had a fairly difficult time pursuing civil penalties against fake reviews and fabricated influence. Most notably, and most recently as well, in 2021, the Supreme Court made a ruling in AMG Capital versus the FTC, which dramatically impacted the FTC's ability to seek monetary remedies. According to the Jones Day law firm, quote, "Going forward, the FTC can seek monetary remedies under the FTCA only in conditioned and limited circumstances, none of which apply to an initial violation of the statute. For example, the FTC can sue for civil penalties and equitable relief under Section 5 if a defendant violates a final FTC cease and desist order. In addition, the FTC can issue rules that define specific acts that are unfair or deceptive, and then, once it does so, seek remedies from violators in federal court." End quote. This matters in a potentially very significant way because as of October 2024, the FTC has not only issued but now fully enacted a rule which prohibits, quote, "fake or false consumer reviews, consumer testimonials, and celebrity testimonials." I'll come back to that part later on, the celebrity part. "Buying positive or negative reviews, insider reviews or customer testimonials, company-controlled review websites, review suppression, and then misuse of fake social media indicators." That right there is the big one. Stepping aside for a minute, while it's certainly a good thing that the FTC is now acknowledging these types of issues, there's another problem that they can't really address, which is overall media bias. Stories like this get reported on everywhere, but parsing which outlets have some sort of slant or subliminal messaging is a very difficult thing to do, which is where today's video sponsor comes into play, which is Ground News. Ground News is a media aggregate service, which cuts through bias and provides as much information as possible to readers. It works by gathering everything in one place, as well as marking key information like corporate ownership, allowing you to compare article headlines and overall content between outlets. Right here, you can see the feed for this very same FTC rule taking place with hour-by-hour updates. And if you go through and start actually reading these, which have all been gathered up nicely for you, there is always more information than you otherwise would have if you simply got all your current events news from a singular source. Not to mention the fact that this opens you up to alternative perspectives and helps break echo chambers, which is a very good thing. We need more of that. There's a variety of extremely valuable tools available on the website. I actually spent like 6 months vetting the service before accepting them as a channel sponsor. But for whatever reason you eventually decide, if you click the link down below in the description or scan the QR code to sign up, you'll get 40% off the Vantage plan. Again, link down below, ground.news/echelon, for 40% off a Vantage plan today right now. Big thank you to Ground News for sponsoring the channel. Back on task. Remember Regal Reserve, the company that purchased a hacked account to bolster their social media influence that I just mentioned before? Well, from the FTC's own website, quote, "The final rule prohibits anyone from selling or buying fake indicators of social media influence. such as followers or views generated by a bot or hijacked account. This prohibition is limited to situations in which the buyer knew or should have known that the indicators were fake and misrepresent the buyer's influence or importance for a commercial purpose. End quote. In essence, just to really quickly summarize it, the FTC has been handicapped for years when it comes to their ability to pursue monetary relief. But with this new rule, as demanded by the Supreme Court, they have defined specific acts such as buying or selling fake social media followers or celebrity reviews, which now lets them financially target offending parties, which opens the door for legitimate consequences and hopefully large-scale impact. The problem with social media now is that fake traffic is higher than ever. Deceptive influence is growing faster than any legitimate counter effort to stop it. But this rule gives the FTC teeth again, in a fight where sometimes even just the threat of monetary harm is enough to stop a lot of people from doing deceptive things. Here's a really good example focusing on the celebrity aspect of this rule. A lot of people watching this have probably heard the name before, but maybe they don't know much else. Cameo. How many people have heard of Cameo? For anyone who hasn't or doesn't know what it is, it's quite literally a celebrity testimonial website. It's advertised as personalized videos, which is true to an extent. A lot of the stuff that they end up doing is like birthday shoutouts or holiday wishes or something like that. But there's also an entire section of the website called For Business. And you don't have to look very long to find glowing testimonials from people like Kevin O'Leary, the Shark Tank guy, about websites and services or even people that he almost certainly doesn't know and doesn't use. This one right here is a long-winded endorsement of this guy named Koss at Karma Media about how great his services are with terms like CAC, customer acquisition cost, and ROAS, which is return on ad spend. But this is a $1,500 video, minimum. It probably cost a lot more than that to make, where an investment mogul seems to be blindly endorsing a random guy who paid him, which, if you ask me, would be in direct violation of the celebrity laws that the FTC just imposed. Side note, I get sponsored all the time. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with the concept of paid advertising, but just using today's video as an example, I pay for the Vantage Plan on Ground News myself and straight up utilize the service when producing videos. I actually use the website, so I have zero reservations advertising for it. Now, I can't say what percentage of Cameo, generally speaking, ends up being fake celebrity endorsements, but it's absolutely happening. It's a sizable chunk of that website. And this new rule by the FTC gives them legitimate grounds to go after it, or the people using it, or the people selling on it, or something. But there's a lot here that makes Cameo probably in hot water. It cannot possibly be overstated just how bad social media has gotten now with falsified traffic. Services that buy and sell followers or engagement are more profitable than ever before. And half the news sources, like big air quotes, news sources that people look up to on Twitter in particular, Twitter being the platform that I've investigated personally most extensively on this subject, are heavily propped up with manufactured traffic. Most large-scale influencers that people watch on a day-to-day basis operate a company. They probably do it badly. Honestly, they do, but they at least have one, which means that the FTC rule, this one, absolutely does apply to them. In the Regal Reserve example, it was an esports company that purchased a hijacked Twitter account and then tried to recruit kids and pay them and run a whole enterprise off of it, right? Like they falsified their influence, they knew it, and then they tried to run a company off of it, which was a pretty low risk thing to do back then. But now they would be risking federal damages prosecuted in a federal court because the FTC has made a legitimate rule. The only issue I can think of here is the actual cost of damages. If the potential fine is bad enough, a large number of companies just won't even risk the behavior. But if the potential fine is too low, which is a legitimate possibility, even a likelihood here, large companies will just consider it a cost of business and keep doing what they already have been. Yes, smaller companies may be scared to receive that same penalty, they couldn't survive it, but the fines for this kind of behavior need to be rather extreme, as bad as that sounds, because if they're not, then the whole thing is sort of wasted. Obviously, the largest online consumer marketplace is Amazon, which has consistently struggled with fake reviews over the years. They even sued like 10,000 Facebook pages for spreading fake reviews or something like that after they were pressured to do so. And if we're talking about fines becoming a cost of business, there's probably no better example than Amazon. But you can find Amazon review sellers right out in the open on the ClearNet. Of course, they all claim to be legitimate enterprises, but basically none of them are. And for a long time now, these websites have operated right out in the open with extremely low relative risk. However, now that the FTC has officially made a rule, whether or not they step up efforts to enforce and heavily prosecute that rule, there's a lot more risk for these companies. And personally, I think it's a very good thing. It's actually pretty interesting for me as I get older because it feels like the gap is now sort of closing. Technology moves faster than laws, absolutely, and the legal system was never prepared for the online world in the slightest. But even just a few days before this particular FTC rule became active, yet another rule was being talked about where click to cancel options have to be implemented, making it easier for customers to get rid of unwanted subscriptions. To some people, it's small, but I would wager that a lot of viewers right now, at one point or another in their lives, have been charged for services they forgot about or struggled to cancel something that should have been easy because there was no oversight and companies were simply allowed to act that way and do whatever they chose. Well, as time goes on, laws are getting written. Regulations are consistently being developed, and the gap between emergent technology and actual oversight seems like it's closing. Yes, to be fair, there's always new developments in new industries, like the SEC struggling hardcore to keep up with the world of cryptocurrency and AI running rampant now with copyright failures, unending copyright failures, and whatever else is happening. But when it comes to faking your own influence on social media and buying traffic for the purpose of misleading customers or viewers, progress is legitimately being made, which is a positive angle for me to focus on. Every day that you use YouTube and every day that you use Twitter and Rumble and Twitch and Amazon, etc., you are engaging actively with profiles and creators, especially, or businesses, big air quotes there in some cases, who manufacture their influence for the purpose of seeming credible. It's not everyone, but it's more than you would think by far. And now that we see legitimate possible consequences, hopefully that world of deception gets a little bit less populated. Sadly, marketing psychology is built heavily around the idea of social proof, which is really just a leveraging of crowd psychology to get more customers by making it seem like you already have a ton of customers, right? Super popular thing to do. And people tend to follow the herd in a lot of their purchasing habits. But at the very least, we now have a better framework to prosecute and penalize the bad actors, of which there is a never ending supply. It's a win, we can be happy about it, and hope that they choose to enforce it effectively. That's it. Personally, I'll be making quite a few separate reports to the FTC about high-profile companies purchasing and selling, in particular, selling falsified traffic. I know who some of you are. I have a pretty decent backlog of evidence on a number of old cases that I just didn't think would go anywhere till now. So that's my part to play. But I also think that social media influencers should now be reminded with intensity that buying fake viewers, subscribers, and falsifying engagement is a risky thing to do. Whether or not they're big enough for it to actually matter is one thing, but at the very least, it might make them second guess or feel a bit more paranoia if they do choose to do it. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below. A special VPN deal, the video sponsor, of course, Ground News, merchandise, locals and Patreon for monthly memberships, and more, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, question everything, and have a nice night.